Hey everybody, this is Oren, and I'm here with Jodi Berman. She is a movie blogger that I've connected with on Twitter, and we're going to be discussing the Oscar nominations, which were announced just a few days ago. Jodi, how much of so there's been 8 movies nominated, Nomadland, Minari, The Father, Judas and the Black Messiah,
Promising Young Woman,
Promising Young Woman. There's more.
Sound of Metal, and The Trial of Chicago 7.
And Mank.
And yes. Mank, right.
And so how many of you, I'm at 5 right now. How many, and I have not seen The Father, Minari, or Judas and the Black Messiah. How many have you seen?
I've seen them all except for The Father.
And I heard you have a pretty impressive statistic. As of today, how many of the films have you seen this year?
I've seen 104 films this year so far. And last year I saw 381. So I'm a big movie buff. I love movies.
That's really great. That's a lot of, that's definitely dedication.
Yeah.
I don't think, so what are your favorites of the year, and how did they do at the Oscars?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, we just actually, Sound of Metal was one of my favorite films of the year. I absolutely loved it. And it did get a number of nominations. I've been obsessed with sign language since I was a little kid, and I thought this was such a beautiful film. I also really, really loved Nomadland. It did pretty well. It did okay. I think it got 6 nominations, and I was really taken by it. There were some smaller, more kind of sleeper movies. I was really happy to see a movie called A Sun, S-U-N, do well with some of the nominations. So, overall, I was really happy. I was pretty upset that Regina King didn't get nominated for Best Director. I thought she had an incredible directing debut with One Night in Miami. I thought that movie could have won every category practically. I loved it. So, there have been some really good ones this year. And, normally each year when there's more than 5 nominees, I'm still like old school. I liked when there were 5 nominees for Best Picture. Every year I feel like I could easily turn this into 5 and whatever else is superfluous. For this year, I gotta say, I could easily accept any of these winning, with the exception of maybe Mank, and I haven't seen The Father yet. I didn't think Mank was a Best Picture, and I don't think it is going to win. I don't think it should win, but I really like the rest of them. I have to say, I don't think there's really a bad one in the bunch. What have you seen so far? Which ones do you like the best?
So let me just go with the first thing about how you only like 5. I think one of the best moves that the Oscars ever made was expanding it beyond 5 nominees.
Really?
How because of that we've started to have different genres like District 9. You have Pixar movies. I don't think Pixar movies like Up would have ever made it in otherwise. You had, Arrival. You had just very out there sci-fi movies like Arrival. You had Mad Max and Black Panther, which were very much action sequel movies. Beasts of the Southern Wild.
Yeah.
I even like The Blind Side in its day, and I was thinking Blind Side would have never made it. So, there's even some of the more traditional films like Darkest Hour, which I thought was kind of it had some room. It's just a traditional film. I don't think it would have ever made it. So, you're just rewarding more films that really, would have never made it otherwise. I generally think that if you look at most years, like, say, Mystic River versus Lord of the Rings, or Brokeback Mountain versus Crash, whatever's films 3 through 5, in that year would have been Munich and Capote. It's really random. Like, Munich and Capote might have gotten in, but so could have like Syriana or King Kong or Match Point or History of Violence. Like, there's usually that 3 to 8 spread that's very wobbly.
Interesting. I know I'm a traditionalist. I really like having the 5, and I don't know that. Are there any Best Picture nominees that don't have nominations in other categories? So meaning, even if they hadn't made it into the Best Picture, they still would have gotten some attention with other award categories.
Yeah, but A good picture should be awarded as a good picture.
Yeah, that's
Is
fair.
the way I see it.
That's fair. See, I see it as, when something is nominated in the Best Picture category, it should be able to win Best Picture, and people say, yeah, that was a Best Picture. And so I'm a little more intense about that category, but I see your argument. I think that's fair.
Well, I mean, even then, I think there's no way that, say, The Queen would have won Best Picture, or I mean, I think that it's usually a race between two, and then the other ones, they get the honor of saying Best Picture nominee.
Yeah.
In terms of what I like, I think you also, talking about purists, I think we are seeing a movement, like with the BAFTAs, we're a little compromised, where they had a panel this year to include diversity, and now they're going to start changing the rules in terms of making sure that enough categories are diverse enough, which I think is maybe changing the rules a little bit, and especially since it seems like a lot of these categories have been diverse on their own for quite a while. I'm even looking.
I'm not so familiar with the BAFTAs and how they work. It's funny because for someone who's so obsessed with the Oscars, which I always have been, and I've been since I was, 20 years old, which I won't tell you how long that is, but let me just assure you it's a long time. I have made an effort to see every single nominated film in every category. And so I know the Oscars back and forth. I don't think I even know. I think I've rarely even known what's nominated for the BAFTAs. I'm so out of the loop on the BAFTAs.
It's generally an interesting ceremony. They have like the most promising newcomer and the best British film, so they mix it up a bit. But they've also been way less diverse because they've actually never nominated Denzel Washington or Morgan Freeman. They seem to have a blind spot for those things. And I don't mind that. It's just different strokes for different folks before, But
if you remember, Color Purple didn't win. It had, I think, 11 nominations and didn't win one of them.
That's a lot of nominations. But I mean, Hollywood is one of the most progressive institutions out there, as far as I can see. So beating up on Hollywood for not being progressive enough is a futile activity, and I
think there's a difference between being progressive as individual values and hiring practices. I think, look, I'm not sure that you can blame the Oscars for lack of diverse stories. You blame the studios for that. You blame the studios for not giving people of diverse backgrounds the money and the backing at the positions, the director titles, the members of the crew, the members of the cast. I'm not sure you can blame the Oscars for it. The Oscars are a symptom. The industry is the disease. So I'm not sure you can blame, even with those controversies. The question is, why aren't people of color getting opportunities to direct or opportunities to be in lead roles? Or, for example, this year, for the first time ever, there are 2 women directors nominated in the category, right? And it's the first time ever the 2 women have made it to the top 5 in the same year.
But we were close, though. It's not like we were. Well, women directors is one of the areas where Hollywood has not done a very good job. I actually do agree with that. But in terms of nominating actors of color, I mean, there have been statistical studies that a lot of that we actually have nominated actors and of color at a pretty high rate.
Well,
especially in 2016 when you had Fences and Hidden Figures and Moonlight in the same year, but
Yeah, and by the way, that's just African American stories. There are diverse communities.
Yeah.
Asian Americans, Iranian Americans, right? So it's, I think to point to when you look at history and you say like 2 Black men have won Best Actor, that is out of 93. That is percentage wise, that's not the 12% of the population that Black people are. So, two winners out of 93 winners is not exactly a fantastic record.
No, it's actually 4. Whitaker, Jamie Foxx, Denzel Washington, and
four out of 93, right? So 4 out of 93 still.
Yeah.
It's not. It's if I'm doing them, it's like 4%.
Yes, I mean.
At any rate,
yeah.
my interest is really in the nominees. I have not done enough research
Yeah.
to be, I'm hardly an Oscars historian. I'm just an enthusiast.
But
And
it's yeah.
And I certainly haven't analyzed it through the lens of diversity on screen. I think it's true that I think it's true that people of diverse backgrounds are not represented in the industry to the degree that white people are. But having said that, I don't have any statistics to present enough to be able to speak as an authority. Can I tell you what movies I liked? Absolutely. Can I tell you what performances I liked? Absolutely. That's really where my, I can't even call it expertise, because there is no world in which I would call myself an expert. Although somebody did say to me, have you spent the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours watching films? I'm like, oh, probably 20,000 hours. So if you're using Malcolm Gladwell's expert movie watcher, surely I am. But the analysis, deep analysis into the workings of an industry, that's not my expertise in any way.
No, I think more of the question is kind of, do you think that, so I guess part one of the question is, do you think that the complaints about lack of diversity might be overblown? And part two is, do you think that they did a good job this year?
No, I don't think they're overblown. I'm actually looking at your list of movies that you've seen and that you sent me in advance of this. And when I'm looking at the ones that I've seen or that I know about, there's almost no Black people in any of these films. So just
but
use
I also didn't
you
see
as a one person, test subject, and looking at your list of 40 films, which is not an insignificant number. And I can only obviously speak to the ones that I know about, Palm Springs, no. Trial of the Chicago 7, sure. I don't know. Nomadland, not really. Soul, yes. Blow the Man Down, no. One Night in Miami, yes. Borat, no. Promising Young Woman, no. Uncle Frank, no. Troop Zero, no. Bill and Ted Face the Music, I haven't seen, but I'm assuming the two leads are white men. Eurovision, no. I mean, it took place in Denmark so I don't need to belabor the point. But this year, I think there have been some breakthroughs. Look, people of Asian descent and Asian Americans finally getting a first, like the idea that there's a first nomination for an Asian American actor. It's a little embarrassing that it's the first one in 93 years, but I'm happy about it. So I don't think it's overblown. And also, I'm not an expert in any way. She's made history this year.
And she's very deserving too, yeah.
Very deserving. And I will say, Nomadland was just absolutely one of my favorite films this year. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was so brilliant. And, Frances McDormand is a revelation. That woman can do anything. I'd listen to her read the phone book. And so I think there's progress to be made. Whether you agree that it's overblown or underblown, I think everyone can agree that there's progress to be made. We're not, there yet.
Well, I think it's more just a need to sort of, let's critically re-examine, let's critically examine the claim that certain groups are underrepresented. And I certainly would never say, I certainly think you're absolutely right that the Asian American community, Asian actors do seem to historically miss out on nods when they come close.
But they miss out on parts as well. They don't get a lot of parts.
And as for
think of lead roles that Asian Americans have been in.
And as for and then there's also there's also like South Asian, East Asian, Middle Eastern. But I actually think that when it comes to the two female directors who were nominated, I actually think they were both extremely good. Did you ever see Tangerine or The Florida Project by Sean Baker?
I saw Tangerine. About the trans actor, the trans
community. I think that Chloe Zhao is in the same style of filmmaking as Sean Baker, who made Tangerine. It's very documentary. It's very
this Nomadland could easily have been a documentary, and in some ways was, because so many members of the cast were people living the nomadic lifestyle. It wasn't really a lot of actors in this movie.
which is also interesting because I actually asked this and I said, is this the first time that someone won an Oscar nomination? I'm just floored by the fact that someone won an Oscar nomination for Borat, where you're not acting, you're acting across real people. I was like, does that count as acting? And they said, why not? Frances McDormand did the same thing. And I was like, oh, actually, you're right. This has been a really unique year for
not only
both
that,
actresses.
let's just give Maria Bakalova and you know, Sacha Baron Cohen some credit where credit's due. You know, with most actors, they're working from a script. They know what's about to happen. They know what lines are about to be said. In this case, these actors are put into situations, and the people they were with could have reacted in any possible way, which means that they had to look authentic in any possible direction, right? And so I think that the quickness and the how smart you have to be to act as total improvisation and in, you know, taking on a character within the total improvisation, I think is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about diversity, she happens to be the first Bulgarian to ever get nominated and the first Eastern European to get nominated in 11 years.
Oh, that's interesting.
She was saying that for some reason, I don't know if there's some barrier to the Eastern European. I don't know. I think maybe the accents and stuff.
Maybe.
So what did you think about the picks in terms of the acting? You mentioned you like Frances McDormand, you like Maria Bakalova.
Yep. You know, I haven't seen The Father yet, so I have heard that the performances in that film are just beyond. I absolutely love Glenn Close, and I just wish that she would get to a place where she would win that damn award. But I will say, Andra Day knocked me out, and I think she has based on history, based on Jennifer Hudson and based on Anne Hathaway, where, you know, the actress looks in the camera, sings the difficult song, pulls off the incredible performance. I think Andra Day could win. And I thought I literally, when she was done singing Strange Fruit, I looked at my husband and I said, well, that's the winner. I mean, she was beyond. Plus, you know, historically, you look at people like Sissy Spacek, Jennifer, you know, when they play somebody real, Reese Witherspoon, when they play somebody real and sound to a T, like she sounded exactly like Billie Holiday. I gotta say, Andra Day knocked me out. What about you? Did you have any favorite?
I would say in the lead actress category, I haven't seen Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, nor did I see this Vanessa Kirby thing. Carey Mulligan and as well as Rosamund Pike both had really interesting performances.
I was sorry that Rosamund Pike got snubbed this year. I thought she was excellent.
One thing about Andra Day is that I did actually was reading about the real life Billie Holiday, who seemed to be more of a very like vivacious person. Like she had the government on her back the whole time, and the government really screwed her over. Like all of that is true. It's horrific what the government was doing to her. But I think there was like a resilience to her that Andra Day was kind of a more depressive thing. And I think that's a Lee Daniels trait, because I hear Precious, and I didn't see it because I hear that's a really just a dark movie. But I hear Precious is about kind of people who are just really down and out and miserable. And I think that, and I also saw his adaptation of The Paperboy, where I read the book in one of the few cases, and the characters were a lot more depressed in that movie. And I think that Lee Daniels is drawn to people who are depressed outside of the TV show Empire. So that might have been his direction. So I think Carey Mulligan is my favorite of the people nominated. I also think that Amy Adams, even though there's no need to nominate her if she's not going to win, I actually thought there was something nice about her performance, as opposed to Glenn Close, which I thought was a little more caricatured.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, men's side is always good. Always good.
On the men's side, I think Kingsley Ben Amos of One Night in Miami was probably playing Malcolm X was really good. But fortunately, I guess Leslie Odom got nominated, and that's a really nuanced performance.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Cooke, he was incredible. It's another one who sounded exactly like him.
And that's also where I think the screenwriter said that he had like two different parts of himself help self, that he debated within himself, and that he like split up those two sides of his personality, the need to appease the masses and the need to like be his own man. And he wrote him in those two characters, and they're not necessarily historical, but it was really clever how he did it.
Yeah, that is interesting. I like that. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe Chadwick Boseman is going to win. I think, you know, the Oscars, they like to give posthumous awards. But you know, like I said, I really love Sound of Metal. I don't think he's going to win, but I just thought Riz Ahmed was so good. And, you know, he learned sign language for this movie that is not easy to make it look natural. As a person who's taken years of sign language classes, it really takes a while before it can look like it's become your language. You know, I can't argue with any of the performances that were nominated. I really can't. I actually was glad that Tom Hanks wasn't nominated, because he's sort of, you know, he and Meryl Streep often get nominated just for being Tom Hanks or Meryl Streep in a movie, and they're always excellent. And I thought the performances that were chosen were so well deserving.
I think actually Tom Hanks is has had a really bad streak in the last decade, because Captain Phillips, he got snubbed, The Post, he got snubbed, Bridge of Spies, he got snubbed. The only thing I think they threw him that Mr. Rogers thing as just a bone, like, we know you want that sixth nomination really, really badly, and fine, you know. So I don't think Tom Hanks has ever been that assured. I was actually thinking that when Kevin Hart got canceled, they might as well just give the hosting gig to Tom Hanks, because it's going to be a while. Because I think that he's going to not be nominated again, anyways.
Well, I think he'll be nominated again, but you know what? He would be a terrific host. That's a good idea.
And he's the president of the Academy right now, or the vice president. So the Academy's run by its actors branch anyway. So
you know, he raised almost all the money for the Academy Museum, which I did join. But
oh wow.
Yes, I joined the Academy Museum, but thanks to the pandemic, it hasn't been able to open to visitors. So as soon as everybody is vaccinated and they open, I should be able to go. And they did and he really was the one who raised the money for that endeavor. So he's very beloved in the Academy. He's very active. But there have been some I just thought really strong performances this year. And, you know, I have to say, so far, because, you know, I write a blog, and my Oscars blog is where I see every single film that's been nominated, and then I post on it. I do a post every single day for all 40 days, from nominations to announcements. And so far, I haven't watched a film that I've really hated, you know, or that I really was like, this was mediocre. And so that's a pretty good year when you can't find a lot of missteps in a year with the nominees, because there have been years. I mean, Ad Astra. Oh, for God's sake.
Oh my God, that was terrible. Yeah.
Terrible. And, you know, of course, I think it was nominated for like sound mixing and maybe visual effects. It wasn't, you know, the commentary on the nominations wasn't about how great the movie was, but just the same, like, oh, for God's sake, that's an Oscar nomination. Bad Grandpa was nominated for makeup. And I was like, are we really going to have to say now Academy Award nominee Bad Grandpa? Come on, man.
Yeah. Well, famously, there's a story about how Eddie Murphy was the front runner to win the Oscar for Dreamgirls, and then the movie Norbit came out, and then people said, oh, Eddie Murphy is going back to his old ways of making terrible movies, and it came out like 2 weeks before the Oscar ceremony, so...
Oh, that's interesting. I never read that, but I kind of love that interpretation.
Which is, I think, yeah. So, I wanted to mention that, what's interesting, so you're in Los Angeles, which is really cool. I would love to go there and, you know, see all the studios and the stars and everyone. I'm actually in Washington, D.C. area, and I used to commute to a job near Gallaudet University.
Oh, wow. I've been to Gallaudet.
That's a very, very vocal deaf community. I mean, they've done protests about deaf people's rights. So if you're talking about visibility,
yeah,
I wonder if that community might embrace the sound of metal or something about like a community, about a movie with people who are using sign language and things along those lines in the movies, or I don't even know.
Actually, I have this pad of paper next to me that what's on it isn't interesting, but the reason it's interesting is that I bought it at Gallaudet University, and it says in sign language, it says just a note on the run, and I bought it years and years ago when I visited Gallaudet. So I'm a big fan.
Yeah. So when you're talking about really great movies, let's talk about, this is a year where I actually thought, I don't think this is a year where I'll be seeing any good movies. Like when the pandemic hit, I actually was assuming that it was just going to be a bad year.
Yeah, our joke all year, my husband and I joked, because the last movie billboard that we saw in our neighborhood was for a movie called Sonic the Hedgehog. And so all year throughout the pandemic, before they started streaming all this stuff, we've been joking like Best Picture winner, Sonic the Hedgehog. Because there hasn't been much, we couldn't see anything in the theater.
And then I thought, then I saw like some really charming movies like Blow the Man Down and Troop Zero, and I thought, well, this is just going to be a year in which a lot of indie movies happened. And I think that to some degree has affected the Oscars, 100%. Whereas usually there is a big blockbuster in the mix, especially with the 8 to 10 film field. There's been The Martian, there's been Gravity, there's been Mad Max, there's been Black Panther. Some of the films that might have made it in, like maybe the new Bond movie or the Wonder Woman movie, they either got muted or they just, got moved off the calendar. So there's nothing here that is a blockbuster.
You're exactly right. And actually, I was just talking about this with a friend of mine, that the space that was given to independent films because of the pandemic in the Oscars, I think a lot of these films would not necessarily have made it to be Best Picture nominees in a normal year. But the space that they were given because the blockbusters didn't inch them out, I think is how they got nominated. But I'm delighted about it. I think there are some really outstanding films.
Which ones? I think Trial of Chicago 7 would have had a decent theatrical run.
Yeah.
Maybe Judas and the Black Messiah. It was.
I don't think Sound of Metal would have made it into a top.
Minari, definitely not.
Minari, who knows? Even I think because of Frances McDormand, Nomadland would have probably done okay. But I don't think Promising Young Woman, it's such a niche film, I don't think it would have made it into the top 8. So yeah, I think independence, I hope the Oscars learn a lesson from this, is that some of these smaller films, they're beautiful and they have so much to offer, and they're worth every moment, sometimes more so than blockbuster films.
I think
their Christmas Day film,
I think the Oscars have learned their lesson, but I don't think movies have learned their lesson, in the sense that I think, like, we were looking at, me and another co-host of mine were looking at the film Booksmart, which is a really good film, and it was in the theaters for like a week or two. Like, a tremendous number of films last year, like Two Popes and Dolomite Is My Name and Irishman and Marriage Story, never even saw theatrical releases more than, or maybe they did for like a week or something, but it was like Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks to qualify. I mean, they did 2 weeks, and mostly it was so that they could qualify for the Oscars, right? But they were mostly streaming. The Two Popes was a streaming film. All the ones you mentioned, those are all movies that people streamed, and they did theatrical releases to have qualifiers.
Oh, and you would know probably because it would happen in your city. Like, yeah, I don't think that. But some of the ones that were meant for the theaters, like Booksmart and just whatever else, it just got pulled out for the next blockbuster. I mean, it's definitely a Good Liar was another one with Helen Mirren and Ian McKellen that I liked a lot, that was not in there very long at all. I think I barely caught the last showing before it went away for the weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just too much ground to be covered by blockbusters and tentpoles and sequels.
Yeah.
And I mean,
that's where we have a lot of really, where I feel lucky to live in Los Angeles, because we have some theaters that are just really committed to independent film, like the Lemley chain of theaters, the New Art, the Landmark. We have a few in Los Angeles that really celebrate independent film, foreign film, documentaries. And the way that I see half of the nominees is through these particular even the shorts, the animated shorts and live action shorts. Every year there's a theater out here called the New Art, and they host a couple weeks run of all the live action short nominees and all the animated short nominees. And then right down the street, there's another New Art theater that always hosts the documentary short nominees. And I don't know what I would do if I was not living in a major market. I don't know how you see those films without these theaters that are really committed.
And in New York City, a lot of these films weren't even, I think, because the New York state government said that the theaters were was closed there for a very long time. What's also unusual is that some of these Oscar films are very difficult to watch on TV. I found myself pausing through the first hour of Irishman and then gave up. I couldn't make it through Roma. In a theater, I probably would have, the atmosphere and stuff would have been enough. And I admired Alfonso Cuarón's other films that I watched, so I was assuming that I would have liked Roma, but it was.
I didn't love it either, to be honest with you. I didn't love it either. I don't know. I'm lukewarm on movies that have very slow pacing and that are mostly slice of life. Like, I don't know what that movie was capturing. I don't know what the plot was. I think it was just a slice of life film, and I'm not a big fan. There have been some documentaries like Naturno this year, which was an accomplishment based on where it was filmed, but it wasn't much. And Hale County this evening, which was a documentary nominated, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 2018, 2019. And again, it was like, I don't know what I'm watching here. It was like 5-minute segments of things happening in different parts of the city. And I just thought, like, this is not, slice of life is not really my genre. I actually I have a time thing. So we should probably
why don't I review the, all right, so I can always